Hi, welcome to the Law Podcast Uganda once again. We are glad that you continue to be with us. My name is Alex Kafero, an advocate of the High Court of Uganda, and I host the Law Podcast. Today, we shall continue from where we stopped the last time. We were starting on the discussion of how to win a case. And ladies and gentlemen, I want to tell you that there are only 3 things to win a case. The first thing is hire a lawyer. If you cannot hire a lawyer, please settle. And this is not because I am creating business for the lawyers. No, it's because from experience, I have realized that the best way for a client to win a case or for a person to win a case is to hire a lawyer. Some represent themselves, but the best option is to hire a lawyer. The second one is have and bring to court the right evidence. The right evidence. If you have an original document, please bring that one. If you have an original of anything that you want the court to rely on, please bring that one and provide that one to your lawyer. And the third, and this is best understood by the lawyers, preparation. If you prepare well for your case, if the client works well with the advocate, I can guarantee you that you will win a case. Those are the basic things. No one should ever lie to you. Hire a lawyer, bring the right evidence, and preparations. An advocate who has not prepared or who has not prepared for the case cannot win you that case. That's why I said that this is best understood by the lawyers. Preparation is key. The other thing that we wanted to discuss and I want to discuss today is after winning a case, what happens? You realize that if you win a case, the other side will lose. Now, when you win a case, usually you want to put what the court has given you, you want to enforce it. You want to get what the court has given you, which we call enforcement, or the technical word, execution. Now, execution is the process of putting in place or getting or satisfying the orders that the court has given to you. For instance, if the court has given you 50 million shillings, it means that you need to get that money from the other side, which has now lost. And therefore, you start on a process which we call execution. Now, the one who has lost the case has also got remedies. The most common remedy is the appeal. I'm sure you've heard of lawyers saying we're going to appeal. Yes, an appeal means a reconsideration of the same case by a higher court. For example, if you are in the High Court, which I know is known by a greater majority of Ugandans and non-lawyers, if you lose in the High Court, you appeal to the Court of Appeal. So that's the first remedy when you lose. The second one is you might ask the same court that has made the decision to review its decision. It happens a lot. You're actually asking the court to reconsider its decision, to look at it again. Probably there's something they missed. Or you think there's something they said in error. Those are the 2 things. When you lose, you can appeal or review. When you win, you go for execution so that you can get what the court has granted to you. Today, ladies and gentlemen, we wanted to finish that, but also to start on something new called the courts and their powers. Technically, the powers of courts are called jurisdiction. That word gives a number of non-lawyers a hard time. Even the lawyers, but they just won't tell you. So jurisdiction means the power of a court to entertain or to hear a given case. Now today, we shall, as usual, make sense of the court system, but in a summarized way, because we cannot discuss everything about the courts. We cannot finish in this podcast. Now, let us start with the highest court. The highest court in Uganda is the Supreme Court. It's not the High Court. It's the Supreme Court. I mean, I'm sure most of you have heard of the presidential election petition being in the Supreme Court and have been wondering, but why is the Supreme Court? I thought it should be the High Court. Now, the Supreme Court is the highest court in the land. That court has two kinds of powers. The first unusual power is the appellate powers. It only hears appeals. But the exception, or the second power or jurisdiction that it has, is only to hear the presidential election petitions. That is why you've seen Mbabazi, Kizza Besigye, and the others tussling it out with Museveni, with EC, and the others, and the Attorney General in the Supreme Court, not any other court. So the Supreme Court only hears the presidential election petition in the first instance, and then all the other matters go to the Supreme Court by way of appeal. And those appeals that go to the Supreme Court come from the Court of Appeal, which now means that the second highest court is the Court of Appeal. The Court of Appeal has its sister court, if I may put it that way, the Constitutional Court. The judges or the justices that sit in the Court of Appeal are the same justices that sit in the Constitutional Court. But when they are sitting in the Constitutional Court, they are sitting to hear matters to do with the Constitution of Uganda. If I am challenging a given law to say that it is not in consonance, or it is contradictory, or it is in contravention of the Constitution, I go to the Constitutional Court, because the Constitutional Court is going to interpret whether the law I'm talking about is actually in contravention of the Constitution. Now, the Court of Appeal does not sit to consider constitutional matters or to do what we call constitutional interpretation. No. That is why you have seen when the court was dealing with Tojikwatako and that kind of those matters, they were talking about the Constitutional Court, the Constitutional Court. And you're wondering, where do I find a Constitutional Court? No, the Constitutional Court does not have a department here, there. No, there are same members, some justices, the same justices that sit in the Court of Appeal that will sit in the Constitutional Court. And when they sit in the Constitutional Court, they are interpreting constitutional matters. So the Court of Appeal, generally speaking, is the second highest court. Matters that go to the Court of Appeal go there, as you hear the name, go there by way of appeal, and they come from the High Court. So the High Court now is the third highest Court of Appeal. So the topmost is the Supreme Court, the second highest is Court of Appeal, the third highest is the High Court. Now the High Court is the most common court known by average Ugandans. And this is because the High Court handles majority of cases. And it is also because the High Court is given so much powers. Even if you had a case of $1 billion, you go to the High Court. Even if you had a case of $1 million, billion, so many, everything, you can go to the High Court. So the High Court, it has unlimited powers to hear everything except what the law has said that it should not hear. For example, constitutional interpretation matters, like I've said, those go to the Constitutional Court. And then the presidential election petition. The law has specifically said that no, these ones should not be handled by the High Court. A High Court is presided over by one judge. And some of you have been to the High Court will have seen that there's always one judge. But when you go to the Court of Appeal, especially when they're handling appeals, they're more than one, they're more than two, they're more than three. And then Constitutional Court, you've also seen on TV, they're more than three, they're five. Then we have the magistrates' courts. The magistrates' courts are the courts that are below the High Court. Now, those ones here have grades. There's a grade 1, there's a grade 2, and the chief magistrate. Now, the chief magistrate is ideally the most senior of the magistrates at the chief magistrate's court. A very simple example, I can use the ones of Kampala here. We have the one in Machindi, I think is the most common, and Mengo. Now, the chief magistrate has powers to hear matters that have a value, a monetary value of 50 million shillings. The G1 has 20 million shillings. It can handle a matter whose monetary value is 20 million shillings. And then the G2, 500,000. These have criminal matters. They have criminal jurisdiction or criminal powers. Now, a chief can handle all matters, but cannot handle matters which have a punishment of death. The G1 cannot handle criminal matters which have a punishment of life imprisonment. And then the G2 can only handle matters which are specified under the law. Those are numerous, we cannot mention them here. But that goes to say also that the G2 cannot sentence more than 3 years. Now, we also have LC courts. I'm sure most Ugandans have been wondering, do LCs have courts? Yes, LCs have courts. LC1 has a court, LC2 has a court, and LC3, which is now the sub-county, the division, they have courts. And those courts are constituted by the local council committees, the LCs that you voted, the LC committees that you voted. They're the ones that constitute LCs. And they have powers to handle matters to do with marriages, do with divorce, especially if they are governed by what we call customary law. And then they have powers to deal with debts, they have powers to deal with children, they have powers to deal with assault and battery fighting, they have issues to deal with conversion, someone took someone's property, they have powers to deal with trespass. And so, yes, LCs have courts, the village, the LC2, which is the parish, and the LC3, which is the division. And therefore, it means that if you go to the LC1 and you lose, you appeal to the LC2. If you lose in the LC2, you appeal to the LC3. If you lose at the LC3, you appeal to the Chief Magistrate's Court. That's how it works. And so, then that leads me to the other kinds of courts that we have. We have specialized courts in Uganda. For example, we have the Employment or the Industrial Court. That court is situated in Ntinda for now, but it circuits, it visits regions, Jinja, Gulu. So that one is strictly for employment-related matters. If you've been fired from your job, you lodge your matter at the Employment or the Industrial Court. We have the Tax Appeals Tribunal. The businessmen and the businessmen generally have heard about the Tax Appeals Tribunal. Why? Because when you have an issue with URA and you don't agree with URA, you can appeal to the Tax Appeals Tribunal. So that one also is specifically for tax matters. We also have the Electricity Disputes Tribunal. We have the Insurance Appeals Tribunal. If you have those specific issues, you go to that specific tribunal. And for them, the procedure is a little informal. It's not as formal and strict as the one in the mainstream courts as we know them. And the reason for this, or the justification behind this, was that we need to create a space where people, even the non-represented ones, can have their issues properly dealt with, and in a rather simplified way, and to speed up the process, to reduce on the case backlog that is disturbing the courts today in Uganda. Therefore, what we need to take from this podcast today is that Uganda has a well-structured system of courts, the highest being the Supreme Court, second highest being the Court of Appeal, the third highest being the High Court. Then we have the magistrates courts, which are headed by the Chief Magistrate, then the G1, and then the G2, which we call Grade 2. Then we have the local council courts. We said we have the village local council court, which is LC1. We have the parish, which is LC2. We have the divisional sub-county, which is LC3. We have said we also have specialized courts or tribunals, which handle specific matters. We have mentioned the Electricity Disputes Tribunal. We have mentioned the Employment or Industrial Court. We have mentioned the Insurance Appeals Tribunal. We have mentioned the Tax Appeals Tribunal. There are others, the Wildlife Court, specifically dealing with wildlife matters. Ladies and gentlemen, for today, we have discussed about the courts. The next time, we shall discuss how to conduct yourself in court. Thank you for watching. Please subscribe and follow us. It's the Law Podcast Uganda. Thank you.